Welcome everybody. Today we have the one, the only Will Lee in the house. Will Lee has played with literally thousands of musicians. If you don't know who this guy is, you've probably been living under a rock. Will, thank you so much for being here today.
Great to be here, Ray.
Really, I'm so stoked to have you here, kicking off the maiden voyage.
It's a pleasure.
Tell me, how did you decide to play the bass? Why did you pick up the bass? How did it happen?
It was a necessity. We had a band. I was the drummer. We were like 11 years old. The Beatles had just come on the scene and caused everybody to get a hold of an instrument and put it in their hand and start doing something, even if it was garbage cans or, if it was like a tennis racket, you'd hold it like this and pretend,
Mm-hmm.
And the kids were like really enthusiastic, all of us. A lot of the kids didn't quite understand that the bass was not a guitar. So the little 11-year-old brain could figure out the bashing thing and the strumming thing, but the function of the bass was just a little sophisticated. First of all, it was a very young instrument at the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was only about 10 or 15 years old probably at the time of the Beatles, I guess, maybe. We got our band sounding pretty good, and I was the lead singer playing and singing from behind the kit.
Mm-hmm.
Having a great old time, but then I was kind of missing out on wishing our ensemble sounded a little bit more professional. We need a bass player.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody our age was doing that. So I said, well, look, let's get a drummer and I'll volunteer to switch over to bass. Worst mistake of my life, because I was the lead singer and it was just like, oh my God, this is very difficult to play these patterns and still deliver the song, I only had drums. I didn't have guitars or bass or anything. So the fact that I had drums made it so that I was focusing on Ringo going, that's how you make that sound. They had close-ups on all the guys in areas with that back and forth swish movement on the hi-hat and stuff. I couldn't wait to go back and start playing my drums,
Wow,
for
yeah.
the first time. I was so excited to play. And then you saw the girls screaming, of course, and we all love attention, especially when you're 11 years old.
Sure.
Yeah, so I thought, okay, I get it. This is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. And actually it turned out to be that was the case. Both of my parents were heavily into jazz, and there was always jazz being played, like records in the house, or they were playing themselves. My mom was a really fine singer, kind of in the Sarah Vaughan vein of jazz singing. And Dad was he loved to play bebop piano. So we're allowed to know what a good groove is supposed to feel like, whatever vein we're playing in. And that's kind of the essence of what we do.
Well, let's talk about you moving to New York. I want to talk about how that happened for you.
Before that happened, I was just kind of like a goofball in Miami, and I was just enjoying playing music, and I was actually doing okay in college. I was studying jazz in the daytime and playing rock and roll at night. I was doing 6 nights a week, 6 sets a night. And besides that, I was in like a total of 8 bands when I left Miami. So I wasn't really dreaming, I got to move to New York. I never thought that for a second. I was just happy playing. But I got a call to come and audition for this band, Dreams. I happened to have been really focusing on at the time. Me and my closest peers were all like mesmerized by this great band, Dreams. Dreams had Billy Cobham on
Billy
drums.
Cobham was playing drums.
Both Brecker brothers, Barry Rogers on trombone. So word got up that there was this kid in Miami. Maybe it was because I had mentioned to a guy that I love Dreams. Maybe he just heard something in my playing. And their bassist was a guy I'd never heard of, so I was in the clear. Turned out it was Chuck Rainey. If I had known, I would never have gotten on the plane, but thank God, ignorance was bliss at the moment. He's since become my idol of all time, my favorite. They put this music in front of me, and they said, now let's count it off and see what happens. I looked at the music, and I looked at the song titles, and I said, I don't think I'm gonna need to look at this music. Just count it off, let's see what happens. So they said, okay, you got the gig. And I stayed in New York since that day in 1971. We had a band called the 24th Street Band. And it was with Hiram Bullock, Steve Jordan, and Clifford Carter. And Paul Schaefer was kind of a friend of all of ours. We had all become really friendly, and he was hanging out in our studio during the second album recording. And Schaefer got this offer to be the musical director of a brand new comedy talk show, music show pilot thing. And I was beside myself because 13 weeks of solid work, oh my God, that's unheard of in my sort of profession unless you're doing a Broadway play. The biggest, sort of like the most security I'd ever felt financially, that I was going to actually know that I knew I had something going on for 13 weeks, which became 33 and a third years. So yeah, it went well.
I'm sure you guys were so dialed in. You could probably read Paul's mind at that point. And
true, he was really good at being spontaneous about where to go quarterly and calling sections, stuff like that on the fly.
Paul has been quoted as saying that you were a very quick study and that everybody in the band is a quick study, but that Will Lee he would get stuff really quick. What kind of advice would you give for somebody that wants to come up today and wants to be a full-time musician and they're willing to go down that road and do the hard work and the practicing?
I don't really know exactly how it all happened for me or how it happens for anybody else, but if there's a chance to play with somebody, and if I'm in a room and there's other players in that room, I always feel like that's the place on earth that I want to be. That's always been my attitude. It's always like I have nothing but gratitude for that experience. And I think that you have to really feel that way when you're involved in music. I think you got to be just loving it, period. You got to be really like all in. Hiram Bullock used to say, if you want to make money, be a banker. And I think what he meant by that was there's absolutely no guarantees really about anything success-wise. We all have those, stories of like parents that, he's in the basement. Yeah, it's great. We love him, but he's driving us crazy, So for drummers, obviously,
my mom was a saint.
Yeah. You'd have to be. She'd have to be.
But she'd get to the point after 4 hours, she'd be like, "That's enough."
Yeah, right.
And yell down and like,
"Can you play another different song?" But these days, I think a big thing to do is like obviously networking, getting out there and out and about. I got to know you just from seeing you out and about,
Art Blakey used to say, you're either appearing or disappearing. So I like that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, we met, I think, at the bitter end a few times, bumping into you. So much of that, like there's plenty of cats that can play, but you hear stories of like, well, this guy lost the tour because he was just being an ass. He wasn't showing up on time. So there's a lot to say for consistency and just being a good guy and a great hang and, talk about that.
I've come to the conclusion that if you respect yourself, you're going to respect others, right. Period. You can always tell when somebody doesn't respect themselves by the way they treat somebody else.
Absolutely.
You know? And it starts there. It starts with just digging yourself.
Yep.
Everything starts there. I think everything. Like
Yep.
world peace starts there.
Yeah.
You know?
It's true. Let's talk about when things weren't so great for you.
It's really about avoiding the pain of growing up. There's something about those awkward years that you're either going to be able to rise above the peer pressure and the unsureness of your sort of awkwardness or your whatever. You're finding
yourself through other people and bouncing it off. And
yeah, and those other people may be so miserable that you're if you think you're looking in a mirror, you may really get depressed because they may not be the greatest representatives that are going to
right,
support
but you
you.
don't know that at the time because you're just kind of
surrounded by them, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's your known universe.
Exactly. So I think that my whole thing started during those years, you know, those years of, wow, let me suppress this pain with something.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt better than the pain.
Right.
So actually, this went on for almost like 20 years or something. By the time I started blowing gigs, not showing up,
Mm-hmm.
playing worse, my relationships with my friends and my girlfriend was really, really bad. I mean, beyond bad, just sick.
The ground you were walking on is starting to crumble, so to speak.
Absolutely. Everything was like really complicated. Everything seemed really impossible. And finally, I just asked myself, okay, are you happy? And it was like the biggest joke ever.
Right.
You know, because I couldn't say yes even for a second because I was miserable and I knew it. So that's when I checked into rehab. I went to rehab. And there I got sober long enough to
take a cold, hard look.
Yeah, to get some therapy and some counseling and look and realize that I owed myself about 20 years of growing pains. I had to grow up. I had stopped growing up when I started doing all that
because that's
stuff.
what they say. You stop growing emotionally when you pick up and now you're 20, 30 years later.
Yeah, now that you've buried it really nicely.
Yeah.
It's still there.
You're still emotionally...
you still have work to do.
Who wants to feel pain?
We're lucky to be alive, man.
Yeah, that's it. One trait that you have that you would call your superhero trait or traits that have helped you?
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm. That's a good one.
Microphone, I got through.
Oh, we got a mic down.
See? Just stay enthusiastic, you know. Keep your eye on the prize.
Right.
I think I learned that from a lot of different people, but one guy in particular was Arif Mardin, the producer.
Mm-hmm.
I just watched him navigate like sessions with all kinds of personalities, like divas and, you know, us musicians and everything else that was going on. And what he was doing was keeping his eye on the finished product.
Right, not getting
Yeah, he had a goal, and that was to get this thing to the best place it could be musically. And he had a lot of chops that allowed him to do that. And besides his arranging prowess and his great ears, his diplomacy.
You know, if we're too distracted by what's happening, you know, towards that goal, we lose our energy.
We love music, and we want to make something that grooves somebody the way we've been grooved by listening to some beautiful stuff. You know, no matter what kind of groove we're talking about, I've come to the conclusion that a groove is a groove is a groove for all time. If it's grooving now, it's going to be grooving decades from now. You know what I mean? You know, even if it's an old-fashioned groove by that time, it's still going to feel great if it felt good when you were putting it down. This is my Sadowski, Roger Sadowski's Will Lee so-called signature model. I guess you could describe it as a Fender jazz bass on steroids. A Fender jazz bass is basically a 2-pickup instrument, which this has 2 pickups. And other than that, my specification stuff is it ships with this little thing called a Hipshot D-tuner, and I keep it tuned down to a low C. And the neck is kind of based on Jaco Pastorius's thin 1960 or 61, whatever it was, jazz bass. So it's a little kind of easy to articulate on this end of the instrument, on the low end of the instrument. And as you go up the neck, you get a 22nd fret. It could have been a 2-octave neck, but balance-wise, it works out really well to have 22 frets from here up to here. It's got a mid-range circuit in it, which is unique to this bass, because Sadowski, prior to me begging him to do that, they were traditionally without a mid-range circuit. And he figured out a way to incorporate that into his already brilliant preamp system. So that's basically the real specifications of a Will Lee model.
So let's put that thing to work.
So I've lately been not really using an amp much at all, been plugging directly into the computer, and there's a wondrous world of plugins that you can play through and sound amazing on your instrument. When I first got into the New York studio scene, I didn't have an amp of my own, and I wasn't allowed to plug into the studio's amps because there was a membership thing where you had to join this club to get the key to unlock the bass amp. And I wasn't a member, so just plugged me into the DI, into the direct. And I got used to hearing myself that way forever. So actually, I'm not really that much of an amp expert. I sort of know what I'm giving you if I can hear the direct bass itself.
Do you use a DI box, or do you tend to go straight into, say, an Apollo interface?
Either or.
You're using?
You know, sometimes it sounds better to add a direct box. Think of Paul McCartney making his first solo album. He just went right into the tape machine. You know, every drummer has his own placement. Some guys will play right on the grid. And by grid, I mean like if there's a click, like a click track or whatever the understood tempo is.
On the beat, front of the beat, behind the beat.
A lot of drummers, like Roger Hawkins was a guy who I did a record with, the Muscle Shoals, great drummer.
Yeah.
Who played way on the right side of the click. You almost think he was dragging if you didn't know better, but that was just his feel.
Because sometimes you come into the control room and you're like, oh, that was shit. It just didn't feel good or whatever, and then you listen back and you're like, oh, wait.
Yeah, that's an art form in itself, you know, just being objective about something that you're a part of, you know. Sometimes you need a lot of time after doing it to get away from it long enough to come back to it and go, oh yeah, it wasn't that bad, you know.
And I think that's what makes you such an amazing musician, is you're so humble, and you're always listening, and you're always striving and searching for the sounds, and you're always saying yes and staying open to the groove and to what's happening musically. Will, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today, and I'm really, really honored to have you as a guest. Thank you so much for being here, and all the best to you in the future.
Ray, you're a bright light in my life, and I love you madly, and thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Godspeed, my friend.
Until we groove again.
Until we groove again.